We continue our subject with Chol HaMoed. For those who are not so familiar, the Tractate Moed Katan dealing with the intermediate day of the festival. The two festivals, Pesach and Sukkot, Shavuot is no intermediate days. And in those special days, we explained several times that there is two school of thoughts. There are those who said as Deoraita, like Sefer Yereim, they hold that the intermediate days, it's a biblical concept that people should observe it in the same manner as the regular festival days, while most of the others disagree and said it's a rabbinic based on the Torah. With all of that said, we enter the domain of questions. So how should we treat those days properly? You walk in a synagogue, you see some people putting tefillin, some people not. You see some people do some work, some people not. So we, in general, in the past 12 days, 12 dapim explained the concept of davar aved. Davar aved, in very short, is the idea that a person have a monetary loss, or you can lose your job, you can lose your huge business opportunity, etc. That if you do not do it during the Chol HaMoed, intermediate days, then it's total loss. So we make an exception for you to do it. The second one, we said that if it's tzorchei rabim, if it's a utility, you need to do work for public, such as water, electricity, and other things that nowadays you need. The third one is po'el she'en lo ma le'echol. If you have a employee, a person works per day or per week or bi-weekly salary, but basically he cannot put food on the table if he's not going out to work. And therefore, for those exceptional cases, we said you can go ahead. There is another form we just learned yesterday, which is letzorech moed, such as you getting certain work done in order to have food ready or whatever need to be ready for the following festival, which is the last day, or in diaspora 2 days of Pesach or Sukkot. So now we are zooming in on the Chol HaMoed, intermediate days, and we ask a question about business, commerce during those days. So the Mishnah said, "Ein lokchim batim, avadim u'be'ema, ela letzorech hamoed." One may not purchase houses. In those days it was the servants, slaves, etc., and cattle, but for sure it's not just cattle. We can go ahead and set as many other applications during the intermediate day of the festival, such as you need a house, can be purchasing, leasing, etc. You need a servant, or nowadays you have sometimes for elderly people, they need an assistant, etc. Or you need an animal. In those days, they shechten an animal and eat it. So we explain you're allowed to do it in a regular moed, but the Rashi explains that the whole problem is if you want to make a profit margin. For example, you want to buy and sell and flip it, or you want to buy any type, animal can be, and other things, in order to do a regular commerce manners, that's a problem. The Tosfot add to that, and he said that we mentioned just examples, but can be many more. Or letzorech hamocher she'en lo ma yochal. Again, as we said earlier, if the seller needs immediate cash in order to buy food for the moed, so for the festival, so you're allowed to go on that avenue, which is purchasing a house, a servant, animal, in order to take the profit in the margin between buying and selling, and buy for that food that he needs for the moed. So again, all of those explanations the Ritva said, it's for oneg yom tov, for the rejoicement of the festival. Be'amina Rava mirav Nachman. So Rava asked Rav Nachman a question. Schar peula she'en lo ma yochal ma'u. He said, what is the halacha with regard to wages for a worker who does not have anything to eat? So, meaning, do you ask a person to do some type of business that it's not real specialty, not just a lay person's job in order just to have the minimum wage for food, or he can do any serious business. אמר לי תנינה, או לצורך המועד שאין לו מה יאכל לעטו ימי. He just quoted the word of a Mishnah that they said, or to provide for the needs of the seller if he has nothing to eat. What is the idea of additional word, nothing to eat? לאו לעטו יהיה שכר פעולה. So אמר לי לא, פירוש כמפרש. He said, it's not to tell us that it's only to sell an item that he owns. He said no, it's explaining that it meant by the needs of the seller. So it's not to do other type of business. We have to be very clear and strict that it's just for his need and not to go further with that. Eitive, Abaye. Abaye asked for something we're going to study on page 18. Ein kodvim shitrei chov b'moed. There is a concept in halacha that's called promissory note. In general, let's talk, for example, you're buying a real estate, or you're buying a note from bank. So there is a, before the era of letter of credit, it's a promissory note. So by doing so, you pave the way for the other party to lend you or to give you certain things in exchange. Later, during the era of the 16th century, the Jewish people who were big commerce around between Europe and other Far East countries, they established the letter of credit, which is the basic of promissory note in exchange. So I'm going to manufacture certain amount of produce in exchange for you giving me a letter of credit approval for your bank that basically guarantee that I'm not stuck with things in my warehouse, and in exchange you're going to buy that product. So the issue in the promissory note, it's do you go and do that in the Chol HaMoed, in the intermediate day of festival? As we said earlier, it's Chol and it's Moed. It's a regular day, but it's also a festival. So it said, Ve'im eino ma'amino, or she'en lo ma lo chal. It happens sometimes that the lender does not fully trust the borrower. So he said, in order for me as a lender to give you the money, I need to have a promissory note that paved the way for me to feel comfortable giving you the money. And the Rashi elaborates on that, and he said the key is that the borrower needs the money for the purpose of the festival. For example, the Tur Orachaim Tavkuf Memhei said that one of the mitzvah of Besamachta Bechagecha, you should be rejoicing in your festival, is to put a how do you call it, fancy food, nice food, for some people nice meat, etc. Something that it's really not usual, something that costs more. So in order for the person to do that, he needs to borrow money. So the borrower requested to have a promissory note. So he said, or she'ein lo ma yochal, arezi yichtov. Or if he is really so desperate for a fund that if you don't do that, he will not have a food on the table. So you're allowed to write a promissory note. She'en lo ma yochal la'atu yemai. So what do you mean by saying you go to two different categories? One, you're talking about money, but in exchange you're going to buy in a way fancy food for the Moed, for the festival. Yet you talk about different category which is so pressed for fun that otherwise you have no food. So what does that mean? Lav le'atu yei schar pe'ula. So it's not are they not meant to add that a promissory note may be written for the sake of the wages of the scribe who draws up the documents? So they said that's the idea, shma mina. So that's what you write from that. The conclusion from it that it's permitted to hire a worker who is in need of a livelihood, even for work that will otherwise be prohibited in the intermediate day of the festival. Motiv Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet asked, since we discussed those issues, he said in Tractate Psachim, page 55, we said and there is a certain hour before Pesach that we have to avoid doing work because we have to prepare for Paschal lamb, for all the preparation of Pesach. So he said, "V'chachamim אומרים שלוש אומנויות עושים מלאכה בהרבה פסחים עד חצות." It's a big discussion at the very beginning, chapter 4 of Tractate Psachim, in regards to a minhag, different minhagim. We have people that have the minhag not to do any work at the eve of Pesach. They have communities that have minhag to do work. And what happened with the traveler that traveled from one location to another? And the Mishnah elaborates on that and said that the person who are temporary visitor goes stringent in both ways. Now here we're specific with a certain professions, such as, number one, he is a hachayatim, those who do tailor's job. The second one is the saparim, is the barber. And the third one, especially in those days, is the launderers, who walk in the need for the festival. So he said, those category, we said that they allow to do work even at that time, which is Erev Pesach. Achayatim, the tailors, sheken hediot. So they allow to do tailoring at the eve of Pesach because it's a lay person is permitted to sew his usual manner during that days. כדרכו בחול המועד, תופר כדרכו בחול המועד. So we said even in intermediate days you're allowed to do tailoring works if it's not a professional type, it's just a lay person. הספרים והקובסים, the barbers and the launderers, שכן הבאים ממדינת הים, because there are certain people who comes from travel overseas, והיוצא מבית האסורים, or people who release from jail for the festival, or in general they're released from jail, so מותרים לספר ולכבס בחולו של מועד. They are those exceptions that we allow them to do this type of work, such as cutting hair, doing hairstyle, such as laundry, their needs, doing the intermediate day of festival, because they did not have the opportunity to do so prior to the festival. So we treat them with leniency. In general, the sages said that during Chol HaMoed we should not do that. But because Chol HaMoed is not in a full category of Moed, we make that exception. But if you tell me that paying wages for a worker who does not have anything to eat is permitted, so kol shra melachot nami nishtaru, so you're allowed to do everything at the Erev Pesach. Because you just said that the wages paid to a worker who does not have anything to eat. So tailors are permitted to work at the eve of Pesach because they're similar to work permitted during the intermediate day of festival. So the Gemara said, you know what? Matkif larapapa elamacha binyan ishterei. So if you go that way, so let's build her to build a building also the eve of Pesach. So guess what? Everyone can come in and said, take for example the constructor people, the building people. Said, look, I see here a wall, and the wall is not straight. It's going a little bit like what is the name of that building? Eiffel building, one of the
Tower of Pisa.
What is it called?
The Tower of Pisa.
Tower of Pisa. Thank you. So the Tower of Pisa, this wall looks not straight. Let me demolish it and build it in order to make it straight, because otherwise it will be dangerous for people. So since building under such circumstances is permitted on the intermediate day of festival, so it should be permitted in general for the eve of Pesach. Matkiv laravina, continue on. So how about the scribe who draw up a document? Should be permitted to do so even on the eve of Pesach. Because those people who write it, they write the betrothal deeds, which is the kiddushim, which we call the ketubah, and also the otherwise bills of divorce, the get, veshovrim, and also receipt for intermediate day of festival. So if you go there, so you can. So Moed 14 karamit. You know what we're talking here? We talk about the from intermediate days to 14 of Nisan, which is the whole idea of Erev Pesach. It's different issues than the Chol HaMoed. Erev Pesach is just the idea of preparation for Pesach. Chol HaMoed, it's because that's part of this entire idea of Moed. Moed mishum tirchau. When it's come to a festival, it's because you're not allowed to exert yourself, to make an arduous effort, since it's Simchat HaRegel, is the celebration of the festival. However, if a person lose lose opportunity, lose money, then they said it's okay. But if the 14 of Nisan is a different story, they need to prepare for the festival of Pesach. The sages was something that you paved the way for making the festival of Pesach nicely, but it's two different categories. Don't compare, how do you say, apple to orange. Next Mishnah, en mefanim, so you don't transfer items b'chol hamoed mibayit lebayit, from house to house doing chol hamoed. However, aval mefaneh lechatzero, but may move it to his courtyard if it's necessary. En mevim kelim mibeit haoman, one may not bring home utensils. Im choshesh lahem mefanan lechatzer acheret. But if you're afraid that some thieves are going to steal it, so if you're concerned about it, if you live in a craftsman's house, likely to be stolen, so he may move them to another courtyard. You contradict yourself. At the beginning part of the Mishnah, you said you shouldn't move at all. Now you said it's okay from one location. So he said that again, it's not going to a public domain. People don't see it. It's going in a private manners. So it's different. Otherwise, it's an issue. So how about carrying, bring home utensils from the house of craftsmen? He none. We learned earlier that you're allowed to carry those utensils from the craftsmen and vice versa for the purpose of the festival. You remember what we said, that we differentiate between Erev Pesach to intermediate days. So so in both cases we talk about intermediate day. You have to differentiate between if you trust the specialist or you don't. If you don't trust, you can take all these things to your house. If you trust him, it's a different story. Mainly, and the main idea is, if you don't trust, it may be stolen. 13b. והתניא, מביאים כלים מבית האומן, כגון כד מבית הקדר וכוז מבית הגזגג. So now we're going to specific items, which one you can do in the intermediate day. So, for example, you take in the house of craftsmen, they have a big jar. You can carry that. אבל לא צמר בית הצבא, but anything that it's not something that you relate to the need of the festival, such as a wood, you take it from the house of those painters. Those days they have a specialists that do all kind of wool and linen works. ולא כלים מבית האומן, not special utensils from the craftsman. ואם אין לו מה יאכל, נותן לו שכרו ומניחו אצלו. But if it's a person such a desperate need, so you have no food, so you give him his wages and leave it there. ואם אינו מאמינו, but if you don't trust this specialist, מניחו בבית הסמוך לו. He put it next to that house. So unfortunately nothing new, it happens there, that sometimes ואם חושש להם שמא יגנבו, if you're afraid that someone is going to steal what belongs to you, מפנה לחצר אחרת, ומנו מביאה ותצלה לתוך ביתו. So the choice is either to take it to a different yard or carry them in a quiet way, not, again, we discussed it yesterday and again today, the idea is maritime, that people will see you doing this type of thing, especially as observant Jew, they may interpret it in the wrong way, that it's permitted to do things. As we said a story yesterday about the great rabbi that doing the Chol HaMoed, he cut his harvest, his crop, he did, and people noticed that, and the next thing everybody postponed all the other work specifically for Chol HaMoed, and he realized that, and he gave it to poor people, all the produce, because again, people see you and think in a certain manners, and therefore we should be extra stringent with that. תרצת מביאים מוליכים קשיא, ותקטנה אין מביאים וכל שכן אין מוליכים. So in other words, your answer is not for that question. So we go back to the key idea that we have to differentiate between two entities, and don't try to juxtapose the two. One is the eve of Pesach, the preparation for the Paschal Lamb. One is the Chol HaMoed, the intermediate day. The intermediate day, you cannot do extraneous, arduous effort doing the intermediate day. Versus Erev Pesach, you can do it even it's not for the purpose of festival. Next Mishnah speaks about mechapin et akziot bekash. You allowed to, on doing the Chol HaMoed, to cover. In those days they used to take the figs, and the figs you take them and they are wet, so they place them and dry them. In some places they used to do it at the top of the roofs, other places they leave it just in a field open, and therefore you're allowed to do it. Now, here's the problem. In one hand, it's not for the purpose of festival. You just dry them, because otherwise, if you don't dry them, you lose the value of those figs. On the other hand, it's involved with effort. So they said you're allowed to do it because it's, again, as long as it's something that you lose, and you lose income, you lose opportunity, so you can do that. The reason I think that they mention all of that in a specific way, it's just because they want to share with us the importance of observing Chol HaMoed as much as we can. For sure, we go through those details to show us that there are exceptions, but yet we're always to make a self-search if those exceptions apply to us. So Rabbi Omer af me'abin, if that's the case, if it's involved maybe monetary loss, you can go extra and do ibui, which means you press them in such a way that it will dry quickly. Those people who sell produce or clothing or utensils, so they can do that, and you can do it during the Chol HaMoed, and the Mishnah tells us that even in public. So as long as people know that you do that for the purpose of festival, it's fine. Next, Hatzayadin, those hunter, Vehada Shoshot, those who grind those chitim, those wheat.
Grains, yeah.
Grains, thank you. Vehagarosot, you take, what is the?
Beans.
Beans, thank you. Osim betzin'a letzorech hamoed. So even you do it for the purpose of the festival, you should do it in the way that it's not appear as something that you are in violation publicly. You do it in quiet way. Rabbi Yossi Omer, hem echmiru al atzmam. Those people, as far as I know, they put a stringency upon themselves. What do you mean? Pligeba. So first we're dealing with mechapin and me'abin. What does that mean? Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Asit, Ravai Mishmei Chizkiya, the Rabbi Yochanan Chad Amar mech aklushe me'abin asmuche. So one said that that the person placed on those figs a little bit a hole, and they divided them, so it's like a light cover, and the other one said that he attached one to another, so that's total cover. So you make it like large one, so a large pile, so it's easy to cover them. So basically we said that he hold that even you have those figs that you make it a pile, making it as a pile of grain, so it's fine. Doing Chol HaMoed, those people who sell produce, clothing, and utensil may sell them, but it has to be in private. Again, so for the sake of festival. So you have a fisherman, you have goats maker, and bean pounders may apply their trades in private for the sake of the festival. Ibayalu. What do you mean by saying in the Mishnah that they put a stringency upon themselves? It means they don't do any work, or you meant to say that they did their work in private, but it's permitted to do it publicly. So he answered and he said, Tashma. We say that all those merchants, those who sell produce, clothing, and utensils, may sell them private for the sake of the festival. He said the people who live in Tiberias, they are more stringent, and they put the stringency upon themselves not to sell at all, even in private. Hunters of animals, fowlers, and fishermen may hunt their quarry discreetly for the sake of festivals. So, again, you have another city of Akko, that's the city Ramban land. When it came to Israel, that's north of Haifa. So there's a port city, and the hunters of Akko were stringent of themselves not to hunt at all during Chol HaMoed. Dashoshei Chilkat Ragis Vetisani. So this is the name of goat makers of those cities. So Dosheshim Besinal Tzor HaMoed. So they do it in private. They crack the grains in private for the sake of the festival. רבי יוסי אומר, דשו שציפורי החמיר עצמם שלא ידושים כל עיקר. Again, what do you mean by stringence? So a certain city named Tzipori, that the goat makers were stringent with themselves not to crack grain at all. So according to Rabbi Yossi, the stringencies involve refraining from work entirely, not just for that purpose. Amar Abaye Chilka, Abaye said that Chilka means one kernel that is broken in two, Chada letarte, 1, 2, Tragis. Tragis means one kernel that broken into 3. Chada litlat, Tisnai Chad le'arba'a. Kiat Rab Dimi Amar, Konta. Rab Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylon. He said that this emmer wheat, Meitivei, this is the Mishnah in Tractate Moed chapter 6. Chilkat Ragis v'Tisnai Tme'im Michol Makom. Now we speak about ritual impurity. So he said this category are susceptible to ritual impurity everywhere. Granted, Bishlam Alamanda Amar Chada letarte litrat arba'a. If it's applied to one who said it is in 2, 3, and 4, due to the reason that they are susceptible to impurity everywhere. But kutna, but one who said that it's applied to kutna, that it's kosemet, why is this susceptible? That's like immer wheat. Why they are susceptible of ritual impurity everywhere? Since haloit kashu, since they are not necessarily become fit to contact impurity by contact with the water. So he said kigonim mekalfan, that they were, for example, the emmer wheat was husked. So he said the ilo sharale b'maya lo ave mikalfa, that since it has not been previously soaked in water, it should not have been possible to husk it. So why the name, you call it chilka? So he said, Dishkal Chilkayu. So I explained in my book on Rashi. Rashi here said as follows. Rashi said, Klomar shenotel haklipa v'ave chelek. So in a simple way, the Lashon Chilka, it's not applicable because Chilka meaning chalak, which means it's total husk. But here we say the Shakar Chilkayu because the husks were removed. So Rashi meant to say that even you take that cover, it still appear that it's part, you still have part of the seed there. You can read more in my book on this Rashi. Meitivei, Hanoder min adagan. We ask a question, if someone who vows to prohibit himself from eating grain, so therefore, Asur af befol ha-mitzri avesh. So the moment he take a prohibition upon himself, he prohibited to partake even a dry Egyptian beans, which is a different one. Umutar belach, umutar be'orez, bechilka, v'targiz, v'tisinai. Now we speak about categories. So he said it's permitted for him to partake of fresh beans, it's permitted for him to partake of rice, or chilka, or targiz, or tishrei. Why? So he said, Bishlam alamar achad letarte, v'chad letlata, v'chad arba, 1 for 2, 3, and 4. Shafir, we understand, nafik lehu, mitorah dagan, because they come out is not no longer under the category of grain. Eleman damar, according to Avdimi, kunta dagan me'aleu. If you say that the Avdimi says that his emmer wheat is still a proper grain, so the Gemara said, kashya, it's remain question, it's difficult because you have to say that Avdimi meant kusemet, it's contradict to what we understand earlier. Now we talk about business, commerce, during the Chol HaMoed. Ravuna sharalu la'anu kruf taya. So Ravuna permitted to those merchants who dealing with spice. People have a special, even nowadays in some stores, they selling and buying spice, different spice. So allow them to sell the produce in the usual manner that in the marketplace, even the Chol HaMoed, publicly. If you have an open store that opens into a row of pillars that runs along the street, so the storekeeper, so again the question is how public you allow it. So if the storekeepers may open and close, it is a usual manner on the intermediate day of festival, since it is not being a public view. So he said, he opened the public domain. He may open only one door and must close the other door, because it's some type of private manner. It's not a regular day of working. Be'erev Yom Tov Achron Shel Chag, the eve of Shmini Atzeret, which is the last day of Sukkot, מוציא ומאתר את שוקי הבפרות בשביל כבוד יום טוב אחרון. And that day, guess what? You're allowed to take out all the fruits because you are basically honoring the last day of the festival of Sukkot, and therefore you make the beauty of the last day. So so the Gemara asks, wait a second. And for the honor of the last day of festival, it's okay to permit it for him to open the store in order to give people the opportunity to prepare for the holiday. But for the honor of the festival, doing the other intermediate day of festival is not permitted to do this. How come? It's not difficult. This braita that prohibited selling in the usual manner applies to what? To fruits, which usually brought in large quantities and could have been purchased before the festival. So people might therefore suspect that the buyer of purchasing it, it's for the use of festival. However, habit valin, and this lenient ruling of Ravuna applied to sale of spices. Why? Because they're permitted, because people buy them only in a small quantities, and it has to be for the sake of festival. So therefore, you're allowed to sell even in Pharesia, even in public. Adran olach mi she'afach. Shulchan Aruch, the code in 539 or Chaim, deal with the question of how far you go with allowance on Chol HaMoed. So for example, Kniya b'Moed, someone who needs to purchase and sell even a house or other matters, if it's a total situation that you have no other source of income to put food on the table, so therefore you're allowed to do it. But again, they said that it should be in private, and it should be in a manner that a person should examine that it's really in such desperate need. It is permitted to hire a person to perform any task on the intermediate days of festival if that person has nothing to eat. In order to provide him a livelihood from the work, even if he has household utensils that he could sell, he is still included in that category of one who does not have anything to eat. That's the task. With regard to one who is only bread and water, some say that he is not considered someone who has nothing to eat, li'araba. While according to others, which is the code and the Rema, someone who has only bread and water may work for wages during the intermediate day of festival. So again, each and every case is different, and the person should always ask. Selling discreetly. So again, that's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 539. One may sell discreetly on the intermediate day of festival in the following manner. If the store opens to an isolated corner or an alleyway, one may open it in a usual manner. If the person to a public domain, he must open only one door and not the other. So the basic idea is we try to avoid any type of work, but if it's necessary, we're allowed to do it in a certain exception. Again, for example, permitted a spice merchant selling spices and vegetables, as well as anything that does not keep, may sell the wares in the usual manner in public, as we all know that this is for the sake of festival. The same apply to those who do the perfume merchants. So as we said in the general rules, Moed, Chol HaMoed treated as a Moed, yet with all those exceptions, they're allowed to do it. So marching is one of them. Marching for certain things that need for the Moed.
Boyachem le shuloim malachai shuloim malachai